Hi and welcome back to the course. In this video, we're getting started with SQLAlchemy, which is a piece of software that is going to allow us to very easily map our objects to database rows. Now that may seem a bit weird and a bit confusing, but don't worry, because throughout this section we're going to explore exactly what that means, and what that means particularly in regards to how easy it is to code and to save things to a database, as well as delete them and update them and things like that. Essentially, it's going to make things really easy. So let's begin. I've created a new folder here in my sort of course area, and I'm just going to once again walk you through the process that I use for creating new projects. I've got the section 6 folder, so the first thing I'm going to do is create a code folder, and inside that folder all of my code is going to be, and then I'm also going to create a virtual environment for this project. So I'm going to do virtual env VM, remember that's the name of the virtual environment, --python equals Python 3.5, and all that's going to do is make sure the virtual environment uses Python 3.5 as the base interpreter for the virtual environment. Remember, if you don't do that, it will use the system Python, which on Mac is Python 2.7. On Windows, it will be the Python version you've installed, and if you've got Python 2.7 as well as Python 3.5, it will be Python 2.7 by default. So just make sure to specify that. Okay, now all that's done, and the only thing we have to do is to activate the virtual environment so that we are using the virtual environment's Python as opposed to the system's Python. So remember, on Mac, we'll do source VM bin activate, and on Windows, you would do VM script activate.bat. Okay, so that's the command you would run on Windows. On Mac, that doesn't work. On Mac, you have to do source VM bin activate. Okay, if you have any problems, do ask in the course Q&A. Now that we're here, let's install the things that we need for this project. The first thing I'm going to do is pip install Flask. That's always going to be necessary. And in my case, it's very quick because I've already got everything downloaded. Then we're going to install Flask JWT. Remember, that's what's necessary for authentication. Then we're going to install Flask RESTful. That's what's necessary for our API mappings. And now a new package, Flask SQLAlchemy. And that essentially is SQLAlchemy, which is a very large and popular library, but transposed into Flask to make things a bit easier to work with from within our Flask app. Once we know about Flask SQLAlchemy, we will be able to use SQLAlchemy very easily. There's very, very little difference between the two, and Flask SQLAlchemy depends on SQLAlchemy. So basically, all of the stuff that is in SQLAlchemy is also in Flask SQLAlchemy. It doesn't really do much apart from make things a bit easier. Now that we've got that, what we have to do is make sure that we copy the code from the last section into this code folder. Now, I'm going to do that because throughout these sections, we're building up the same API to make things easier for you, and to make sure that the concepts stick from one section to another. And then at the end, we're going to work on a larger project. But for this section, let's copy the code from the previous section into the code folder. So you can do that using Windows Explorer or the Finder or even Atom if you prefer. I'm going to do it with a terminal because it's a bit simpler for me. But again, all we're doing is copying the code from section 5 into the code folder that we've created. So what I'm going to do is cp section 5 code star into code, and that's fine. I get a wee error there saying that the PyCache item was not copied because it's a folder as opposed to a file, and that's fine. I don't really care about that folder. That folder is just keeping things that Python uses so that it can reuse them quickly, essentially. Okay, now we're going to look into the code folder, and as you can see, we've copied a bunch of things. We've copied app.py, createtables.py, data.db, item.py, security.py, and user.py. I'm going to remove data.db And once again, you can do this through the terminal if you want, or through Atom, or through Windows Explorer or Finder. It doesn't matter how you do it. But I'm just going to remove data.db so that we make sure that when we create the file data.db again, it works and it's not using the data.db from the last section. Okay, now that all of this is done, which was this sort of setup, we're going to run Atom in the code folder. So again, you just run Atom and open the code folder. I'm going to do it through the terminal because it's easier. But if that doesn't work for you, you can always just open Atom as normal and open the code folder by going to File, Open. Okay, so no magic going on in here. So now what we've got is what we know and love, which is the code folder. And in it, we've got our app, create tables, item.py, security.py, and user.py. Okay, so we're now ready to continue in the next video where we're going to get started coding this new project. I'll see you there.